We're starting a brand new unit today on civil liberties, and we talked about civil liberties yesterday as it was one of our vocabulary words. If I think everybody in here has completed their vocabulary words, but if somebody at home has not, feel free to, here's another copy of them. You can pause this or, pause the video from yesterday, do whatever you need to do so that you can submit these 15 words. And we know that from our words yesterday, just what civil liberties are, and they're just basically like the fundamental rights that individuals have. So, where do we find our civil liberties at? Everybody on the count of three. Where are they at? 1, 2, 3.
Constitution.
They're found in the Constitution, specifically in the Bill of Rights. You guys are wicked smart. So, our civil liberties, as defined, are specific individual rights like freedom of speech, protection from self-incrimination. You don't have to testify against yourself. In fact, you have the right to not say anything. The right to remain silent. Keep your mouth shut. And I highly recommend that you do that if ever you find yourself arrested. Okay? So, and these are constitutionally protected freedoms, constitutionally protected liberties. And as you know, I'll give you guys another minute. These rights are protected, as you said, in the Bill of Rights. Have Americans always had these civil liberties from the very beginning? No, because as we know, the Bill of Rights are, what are the Bill of Rights? Amendments. There's changes, additions made to the Constitution. So initially, when the Constitution was written, these protections were not included. But they became included in, anybody know what year? 1791. You guys are so smart. Very good. Very good. So, and they were all added at the same time. It wasn't like they added one and then a year later they added two more. They were all added at the same time. Enacted in 1791, the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, where certain rights are specified, like life and liberty, property. Pursuit of happiness might be more of a Declaration of Independence thing, but you're not far off. We could thank John Locke for all that, and Thomas Jefferson for plagiarizing John Locke. So these things are necessary. These are necessary. They are important. How were they born? What was the origins of the Bill of Rights? What people?
State founders, the small state.
Say it again. The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Federalists were on what side?
Federal.
On the side of the Constitution.
We want the Constitution, get it done no matter what. And the Anti-Federalists were,
Anti-Constitution.
hey, your Constitution's okay, but we better have some protections. And those protections came in the form of the Bill of Rights. Who ultimately won? Federalists, because the Constitution was created without the Bill of Rights. But very soon after, within 4 years, these Bill of Rights were added. Okay? So, who cares? Big deal. Why are you required to sit here in a classroom and me tell you about a bunch of words written by a bunch of dead white dudes in 1700s?
So we know our rights.
Why are they important? It's just something that's been written down on paper.
Because they define America.
Yeah, these things are extremely important, okay? Like, wildly important. This is all about, procedural due process and, like, things that you guys may have to deal with if ever you have legal issues in the future. So, the Bill of Rights, they're important. They're important. Okay. All right, so, just kind of we'll kind of go from the beginning, all right? And we lump freedom of expression together with a lot of parts, mainly protected by the First Amendment. Mainly protected by the First Amendment. It's first. So do you think our founding fathers thought that freedom of expression was important?
Yeah, it was important.
Why?
Because democracy won't work without it.
Why?
Because if you suppress people's different viewpoints, then there really is no democracy. Because then you can make sure there's only one viewpoint to look at.
Yeah. Expression is the most basic aspect of democracy. Unless the citizens can openly express their political opinions, then they cannot properly influence government. That is why it is important. Because citizens need to be able to openly express their political opinions. If their opinions are suppressed, then they cannot properly influence government or act to protect their rights or the rights of others. Speak up for yourself. It is your right to do that. Speak up. So, you have, as part of this, you have the freedom of speech, which is in the First Amendment. So that means that you can say anything you want to whoever you want, whenever you want, as loud as you want? No?
It's freedom of expression, not freedom to do something without punishment.
Okay. Okay. So so is freedom of speech absolute?
No.
Of course it's not. It is absolutely not an absolute right. You are not entitled to say, whatever you want. You cannot go up to the president and threaten the president's life. It would end poorly for you. Okay? So there's a lot of examples of this, basically to get just a very simple definition of what is okay and not okay. If it endangers national security, is threatening, or wrongly damages the reputation of another, you can't say it. Unless it's true. If it correctly damages the reputation of another, that's fine. But if it wrongly damages, we can't do that. So, America does a really good job at adhering to this, right? No? America has traditionally had some issues when it comes to protecting its citizens' rights and protecting its citizens from the government. When was this created? When was this? 1791. When was the first time Americans, had to worry about the government infringing upon their rights?
Alien and sedition.
Yeah, like 1798. Not even a decade. Not even a decade did we make it. Now, I have World War I stuff up here. But see this guy with the ponytail? That's like a colonial picture. And you see he's got his mouth covered.
He has a really big nose.
Yeah, he's got a really large nose. We talk about that's my profile, Chase. I'm picking Chase. I'm kidding. Okay. All right, so yes, America has definitely tried to restrict its citizens' free expression. And the first of many examples would be the Sedition Act of 1798. The Sedition Act of 1798. And what the Sedition Act does anybody remember before I tell you? Anybody got a...
Sedition Act?
Yeah,
Just the sedition.
Sedition, wasn't it like it took away your right to trial and stuff?
Yeah,
So
it
if
took away
they
your
find
right.
you, I think you
can't speak against.
Yeah, so you can't speak against the war or anything like
because you could be exiled.
What war?
What war?
that. Any.
Hunter?
French and Indian.
I was asking about
That
I
was
trying to get the year on here, but
You're only 5 decades off.
Yeah.
what year was this?
1798.
War,
What a year.
Who was president?
Washington.
Adams.
John Adams.
Really?
Yeah,
I just
Well,
guessed.
Jefferson named him.
Is that him? Adams right there?
sure.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, what the Sedition Act of 1798 does is it makes it a crime. It criminalizes the printing of false or malicious newspaper stories about the president or other national officials. So if you say something bad about John Adams, you can be locked up for it. Especially if it's false. As a result of the Sedition Act, several people were arrested during John Adams' presidency. What political party do you think those people belong to that were arrested?
The opposite party.
The opposite party, the Federalists, which was?
Oh, wait.
Jackson, no, not, did I say Jackson?
Democratic Republican.
The Democratic Republicans, also known as the Jeffersonians.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah. Okay? Of course you were. So, it just so happened that when John Adams is defeated in the third, when John Adams is defeated, the next president of the United States is Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson pardons every single person who was arrested under the Sedition Act, calling it an alarming infraction of the Constitution. At that time, there was no judicial review. It was not established until 1803 with Marbury versus Madison. That's just one of the first examples. There's been several other examples, like the Espionage Act of 1917. That actually did take place during a war. Unlike the Sedition Act, there was no war going on. What does the 1917 Espionage Act do? Anybody know?
Like the Red Scare and stuff.
Red Scare and stuff.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Red Scare. Red Scare wasn't that time, but it was where they would find people. They took away your trials and stuff. They'd exile people.
Okay, all right.
They still make 100%.
It's very, 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 very similar to what John Adams tried to do with the Sedition Act in 1798. That says 1978. Get rid of that. Should be 1798. All right, so get a little, dyslexic. So what the Espionage Act does is it prohibits forms of dissent like distributing anti-war leaflets. Because there was a portion of people in America who were totally against American involvement in World War I. And they advocated for people to not report for the draft. They advocated for people to be conscientious objectors. And a significant portion of these people belonged to the Communist Party. So the United States of America wanted to lock them up or deport them. So when people begin to be locked up, judicial review does exist in 1917, and eventually it goes to the Supreme Court. And the name of the court case that makes the determination about whether the Espionage Act is okay is Schenck versus the United States. Schenck. Schenck versus the United States, 1919. So in this case, the Supreme Court unanimously rules that the Espionage Act is or is not constitutional.
It's not.
Is.
Because it was dangerous.
That's right, because the ability to restrict speech was okay as long as that speech was of a nature that created a clear and present danger. So the clear and present danger test comes out of Schenck versus the United States. Because these people are advocating that you don't need to, show up when you're called for war. And that could be a problem if they have a successful movement. I mean, it would be bad. It'd be like if, hey, we're calling up the National Guard to protect Washington and nobody shows up. And then bad things happen. So, what about if somebody goes into a crowded movie theater and starts screaming, "Snakes! Snakes everywhere!"
It will cause panic. And it's not.
Is that okay? Can you do that? Snakes in the movie theater?
Public
I know some people don't.
Is that against the law?
Yeah.
Yes. You cannot. What about if I just said right now, "Snakes! Am I breaking the law?
No.
No,
What if you're schizophrenic?
I'm not. Well, I mean,
Yeah, but then that's just like a different circumstance.
Yeah.
Alright, fair enough.
Plus, if you had,
I guess.
so, but this stuff's old. That's over 100 years old. The first one, that's like the very beginnings of our country. What about some modern day forms of government restricting free speech? Are there any?
I'm sure there are.
yeah,
I'm sure there are. Okay.
positive there are.
Yeah. One has to do with. I was going to save this for tomorrow, but we'll go ahead and do it. One has to do with a Supreme Court case that you're going to do a case brief on tomorrow, and that is New York Times versus the United States. And this took place in 1971. Okay. There's this thing called the Pentagon Papers. You ever heard of them? Okay. What was going on globally, kind of, in 1970s, early 1970s, late 1960s?
Vietnam War.
The Vietnam conflict, Vietnam War. And basically, the United States government was lying to the American people about how many American soldiers were dying, about the progress that was being made. And a journalist discovered these lies as a high-ranking official in the Pentagon leaked this information to him. All right? And has evidence that the United States government is lying to the American people about these numbers. And he compiles all this into an article, which he refers to as the Pentagon Papers. Okay? So he's now going to publish the Pentagon Papers and be a whistleblower. He's going to blow the whistle on the American government, saying that they are doing things that are bad, okay, that are lying. So, before he's able to do this, the United States government steps in and says, "You're not publishing this. You cannot publish this." All right. So, the Supreme Court ruled. It obviously then goes to the Supreme Court in New York Times versus the United States in 1971. And the Supreme Court ruled that the publication of the Pentagon Papers could not be blocked by the United States. Why was the United States government trying to block it?
Because they didn't.
Because what, Sarah? Okay, secrets that showed.
It just
They
showed
were
we were
lying,
lying.
yeah.
I mean, it was just the government was lying.
Yeah.
And so what? So is it just are they just trying to cover it up? Because why? They have to have a legal argument. Saving their own butt is not a legal argument. What would happen if people found out that the government was lying to them about the Vietnam War? Do you think that's going to help the war effort or hinder it? It's going to hinder it. And so they're trying to claim that releasing these would create a clear and present danger. They're trying to say it's a national security risk. That's the argument the United States had in court. So, the Pentagon Papers, these secret government documents that were really illegally obtained by a journalist, they were leaked out by a government agent about the progress of Vietnam. The court ruled that any system of prior restraint on the press is unconstitutional. You cannot prevent them from doing this unless the justification for it is overwhelming. And the justification for this was not very overwhelming. And so the implications of this, what are the implications of of the New York Times versus the United States? It's a win for who? The media. Press freedom. It's just another notch in the belt. The press have the right to put out what they want, without restraint from the government. And that's what prior restraint is, publication before the fact. The government was going to stop them from doing it before they did it. Okay? So, the government basically cannot stop the press from expressing their views, with very few exceptions. You guys ever heard of a newsman named Geraldo Rivera?
Yeah.
Okay, Geraldo was like very famous. He had his own TV show in the '90s, or maybe the '80s.
Mustache.
He's got a big mustache. He was the guy that was gonna uncover Al Capone's hidden vault, and he had a big live television event. And he didn't look in it before the television event. And he opened it up, and it was empty. Like, huge embarrassing. Anyway, during the war in the Persian Gulf, Geraldo attached himself to a division of Marines. Okay, and he followed the Marines around and reported on the events that those Marines were doing and the movements of the Marines and the activities of the Marines. And he reported on it daily. What's wrong with that?
If the enemy gets that information.
If you're the enemy, you know exactly what's going on. And the federal government shut him down, like Geraldo. You are telling the enemy the position and putting these soldiers and your own life at risk. And so that's not allowed anymore. That's one exception where the press is not allowed to report on the actions of government, the movement of troops. Okay, like specific movements of troops.
That's overwhelming.
Yeah, that would be overwhelming because it is definitely put. And if I was a soldier, I would appreciate you keep your mouth shut, Geraldo.
It can be public.
Soldiers aren't even allowed to give details as to their location to their family members in letters home or in electronic correspondence. They can be like, "I'm in Iraq," but not like I'm on the banks of the Euphrates River, half a mile from wherever. Yeah. Okay. So, and that is a valid restriction on press from the government because it puts people's lives in danger, and it also has to do with war. War. Our everyone's rights change during wartime. Yes, Hunter.
Would he be allowed to publish his findings after the war?
Who's this?
Like the guy that was following.
Oh, Geraldo?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I believe he did. Most people do write books about that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so you guys have questions about prior? I know is any of this stuff difficult to comprehend yet? Okay. Prior restraint, how the government can and does restrict your speech. Tomorrow, I think you have an assignment. Thursday, notes, we're going to talk about libel and slander, because those are both restricted forms of expression. And then we're going to talk about obscenity, things that are obscene. What is obscene to you may not be obscene to me. What's obscene in Sophia, West Virginia, may not be obscene in Las Vegas, Nevada. So how do we come up with a definition of obscenity? All right. We will not be viewing examples of obscenity, but we will be discussing obscene things.
Wait, when?
Probably Thursday.
Okay.
Okay?
And we have a paper.
Everyone tomorrow.
I know there's one tomorrow.
Friday.